If you're working yourself to the bone, but every day looks exactly like the last, it's easy to feel paralyzed. You watch friends, peers, and strangers glide forward, while you remain frozen inside a blur of exhausting stagnation. Thomas sat alone in the dark, his phone dying and his mind racing with questions. He had reached a brutal conclusion. No secret mentor was coming to discover him, and no sudden windfall would drop from the sky. He didn't respond by making a grand promise to change his entire life by tomorrow. Instead, he committed to a microscopic, unglamorous variable: 1 single hour a day. That night, he stopped looking at the door for help and started looking at the clock. He had traded the hope of a miracle for a quiet, solitary commitment to himself. Thomas lived in a forgotten village where the infrastructure was failing, the walls were cracked, and futures were decided by zip codes. Poverty dictates a very narrow set of expectations. His peers still managed to laugh freely, but it was a shallow comfort. When your daily concern is basic survival, you have zero mental bandwidth left to set ambitious goals. Looking at the reality of the future is often too heavy to bear. People didn't insult Thomas, they simply ignored him. This kind of invisibility is dangerous because it seeps into your psychology and quietly convinces you that you genuinely do not matter. When your environment dictates your worth and you internalize that lack of expectation, accepting your own invisibility marks the end of your potential. The daily hour was a messy, frustrating crawl through dense information and physical exhaustion. It lacked rhythm and felt entirely disconnected from any sense of progress. He worked in the dead of night while the village slept. Most days his brain felt drained. He failed repeatedly, battling an overwhelming urge to shut his eyes and return to his old life. He never told anyone what he was doing. He grasped early on that talking about goals provides a false sense of achievement. Silence, however, forces you to sit with your actual progress. Discipline, in these early stages, functions as a daily friction against the human desire for comfort. It is a persistent battle against the version of yourself that wants to quit. Months dragged by. On the surface, absolutely nothing had changed. He wore the same clothes, dealt with the same financial struggles, and lived the exact same invisible life. Inside, his excuses were dying off. His focus was sharpening into a weapon, and he was developing a cold, patient resolve. This chart tracks two variables. As the line representing social connection dips, internal capability climbs, highlighting a difficult reality. Extreme discipline isolates you. The widening gap shown here represents the cost. Friends drifted away, and absolute loneliness became his baseline. He was constructing an entirely new psychological foundation. It is impossible to build a new life while staying anchored to the habits and social circles of the old one. Entering this valley of isolation is the mandatory, non-negotiable tax required for personal transformation. 1 full year later, he reached the tipping point. The quiet accumulation of thousands of minutes finally breached the surface and became a visible reality. This curve illustrates compounding effort over 365 days. The prolonged flatline eventually gives way to a sharp vertical ascent. At this point, his fear was replaced by confidence, and high-level opportunities began actively seeking him out. What looks like an overnight transformation to an observer is the inevitable outcome of invisible compounding. Success is simply the point where thousands of isolated minutes finally reach critical mass. The dynamic flipped. The same people who once looked through him were now crowding around, desperate to know his secret. Thomas felt a cold fury. He looked at the people around him and saw decades of potential being traded for the hope of a miracle, realizing how much time is wasted waiting for a permission slip that never comes. People wanted a complex, exciting shortcut. Instead, they were met with the boring reality of 1 isolated hour every single day. Stop waiting for inspiration to save you. Choose your 1 hour, willingly step into the isolation, and start building your separation today.